Hello, in this video I would like to give an analysis of the short story Next Door by Kurt Vonnegut Jr. And the story is from 1955. So I'll start by giving a short summary. The story starts in this house where the Leonards and the Hodges live, and we hear a peaceful argument on whether it's alright to leave the boy behind because the parents are going to see a movie and they don't think that Paul, their son, is old enough to watch it. So Paul stays behind and he hears arguing from his neighbors through the paper-thin walls that this house consists of, and the argument keeps increasing in terms of sound, so it's getting louder and louder. And at some point, Paul really doesn't know what to do. He thinks that the two people that we assume is husband and wife are going to kill each other, and that's not very good. So Paul calls this radio guy, and he goes on air, and he delivers a message on that the couple should make peace and not fight anymore. And the radio guy forwards this message to the listeners of the radio station. And then all of a sudden it goes quiet in the next room at the Hodges, and Paul thinks that he has done something good. But then suddenly a woman that isn't Mrs. Hodges starts screaming. So we become aware that maybe it's not the couple that we assumed it was that's next door. And suddenly we hear shots. Paul hears shots, 3 shots to be exact. And he thinks that Mr. Hodges has been killed, so he runs to bed and cries. And then shortly after, the police comes because this shooting has been reported. And Paul and Mr. Hodges. No, Paul goes into the hall, and out comes Mr. Hodges, which is quite the surprise because we thought that he was dead. So another surprise there. And then they convinced the policeman that nothing happened and there were no shots. And all of a sudden, Mrs. Hodges comes running into the building, and she's reunited with Mr. Hodges, saying all that she forgive him, and she heard his message on the radio, unknowing that it wasn't him that sent it. And then Paul's parents come home, and they find Paul laying in his day clothing, and some of my text has gone. So they take his clothing off, and his mother finds a ball of money and lip-stained Kleenex in his pocket, and that's rather weird. We don't know how that got there. But then Paul's dad asks what the ball smells like, and Paul's mother says taboo. But we'll get back to that later in the analysis. I'll start my analysis by giving a characterization of Paul and his parents, just a short one. We don't know very much about any of these people, but Paul is described as being very tall for his age and rather thin, and also having this sort of sleepy sweetness around him that he engendered from his mother, by his mother. He's 8 years old, and he seems rather curious on life, like when he listens to the argument from next door, when he could have just been watching television or something else, playing computer. And he grows up during this story, but we'll also get back to that later. His parents, I think they're rather irresponsible to let Paul be home alone if you take into account that all these things happened. I know that they don't know that this will happen, but still I think it's a bit irresponsible. Also, they're very protective. They won't let Paul watch some movies, for example, the one in the cinema, and also certain magazines. He's not allowed to read certain magazines as well. And then his mother thinks he's growing up too fast, but I think that's a normal parent chain of thoughts, that they don't want their children to grow up too fast. We'll continue with a comparison of the two families. So we have the Leonards and the Hodges. We don't really know very much about the families, but I have found 2 points that I think separate the families. The first one is that in the start of the story, the Leonards, the parents, argue very politely and in a good manner whether the boy should be home alone or not. Contrary, the Hodges argue loudly and passionately. Through the thin walls, we can hear him argue very much. The Leonards are a functioning family. The family is working. They have like a bond with each other, as I see it. Contrary to the Hodges, who have a rather dysfunctional family, with the Mrs. Hodges suddenly storming in with their bags and forgiving Mr. Hodges. So there must have been some problems, yeah. And also the fact that Mr. Hodges has a mistress that actually gets killed, if I have understood the story right. Furthermore, my expectations as I read the story, a lot of things surprised me. Some of the things were that it's not his wife he's arguing with. That's a bit weird. I thought it was. That seems like the logical thing to do, fight with your wife. I was just following what Paul thought, but he was wrong as well. So the story does not go as I would expect. It takes like weird turns of events several times. Also, Mr. Hodges is alive after he had the shooting, and I was very certain that it was the mistress that had killed Mr. Hodges, but I was proven wrong when we saw him in the hall. Maybe she committed suicide, but we don't really know. Then I would like to talk about the realism, or maybe lack of same. The story does not contain any supernatural elements, so that's pretty realistic. But also, there's not very many in-depth explanations during the story. Maybe that's because of the genre that it is a short story. I don't really know that. I won't pretend that I'm an expert on that subject, but I think there are a lot of realism in the story. It doesn't seem unrealistic what happens during the story. For example, there are no supernatural elements, but also I think the mother's relation to her son seems realistic. The way she's maybe not overprotective, but very protective around him. And it's very normal that she can't accept how fast he's growing up. Also, I think that it's very realistic that Paul gets very upset when he hears the shooting or the shots from the other room with the Hodges in it. Some unrealistic things that happened, I thought, was the police officer's response to Paul and Mr. Hodges' behavior. But because they must both look a bit confused, they've just seen or heard people being shot, and that's crazy. But maybe the police officer is distracted by Mrs. Hodges that runs into the hall all of a sudden and shoots. No, she doesn't shoot, of course. She shouts, and that distracts him, I think. I I think that it's a bit weird that the mistress shot herself 3 times. Is that even possible? Maybe she didn't hit the first 2 times, but still I thought she would have been dead by killing herself once or shooting herself once. Also that the body disappears before Mrs. Hodger gets home. That the mistress body, I think that's well done by Mr. Hodger. Yeah. And then to the ending, I think we see a clear shift from the start to the ending of the story, the beginning to the ending, that Paul grows up in a way. A quote that where we see that is that a purple emotion flooded Paul's being. Childhood dropped away, and that's when just around the shooting, and he actually grows up. He is this typical coming of age story where he's a child at first, and then he goes through some stuff during the story, and then he comes out on the other side with a more like adult view on life. Also, I think a very important part about the ending is this quote: Paul's father sniffed the air. "What's that smell?" he said. Paul's mother rolled her eyes. "Taboo," she said. Nah, I think it's a bit weird that she says that something smells like taboo. How does taboo smell? And it's when they find the ball of money and lip-stained Kleenex. And I think that maybe that there might be 2 meanings to it, like a shallow one and a deeper one. And at first, I think maybe taboo could be the name of the perfume that Mr. Hodges' mistress is wearing, but that's rather shallow, and we'll go in depth with it. But that could be the reason why she spells taboo Tabu instead of Taboo, which is how you spell it in English normally. Taboo is like the Danish or the German spelling with the U. So maybe it is a name of the perfume. It would make sense. But also I think that the fact that it's called taboo is because it symbolizes that they're within the family or the environment they live in are some subjects that are taboo. Topics like why Paul not allowed to read certain magazines and watch certain movies maybe. And maybe that brings us back to Paul's mom not wanting him to grow up or just wanting control and be protective of her son. Anyways, that was what I had. Thank you for listening.